Yeah.
Happy Monday, everyone. So I'm here with Betty Withrow and Judy Baker, and we're going to talk about some of the fabulous tools for writing and publishing. And it's never been a better time, really, for writing and publishing. There's so many excellent tools, and it's really, you can do things, and many of them are free, some of them are expensive, but it hasn't always been this way. So maybe, Judy, you can introduce yourself and explain how you got started in publishing, what you went through to publish your first things.
I can definitely tell you about that. Well, it's really funny. Back in the dark ages, I was in high school, and one of my friends worked for a company that was fairly new at the time called Veritype. And they were one of the first digital typesetting software companies out there. And I was intrigued because I'd written a book of poems that I wanted to publish. And I marched into my counselor's office and said, I want to take industrial arts, because that's what they called it back then. And long story short about that, I got approval because my father came down to the school and said, she's taken the class, because they didn't let girls into this class at the time. So I learned how to set type. I learned how to run an offset press. And I thought it was amazing that you could take your work and create these metal plates that then they used on the printing press. And who knew that about 25 years later, I was going to be a graphic designer and work with publishers and printers. And I eventually worked actually for a small pre-press company. And I knew how to troubleshoot people's files because I knew what was going to happen to them when they went into production. So that used to be really painful. And in fact, the internet was so slow at the time. If you had a file that you needed to take to the pre-press company to create your plates, you needed to drive over your disk. And I mean disk. I mean, we're talking floppy disks, and then it became cassettes and all these other things. So it's a lot easier today to get your stuff printed. And I think the people that never had to go through that don't know what they're missing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like programming using punch cards.
I did that too. Blind terminals. Oh,
yeah. But you gained a really good appreciation for the art of typesetting, and how and you had to be precise, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. You couldn't make I mean, the ease with which you can make changes and corrections, and say you've published something now, and if you're self-published and you find something and you want to change it, you just upload a new file. And it might just take a few hours. It could take a few minutes. It could take a few hours, but you've got your stuff up there ready to print. This used to be, you'd do the thing, you'd proof it. They would print out big sheets of stuff. You'd proof that first, and then it would go to the press, and they would run off, samples and samples and samples to be sure everything was all lined up and all that. Very different today.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I remember when I was back in the early days of the Commodore 64 and the Apple II, dragging my feet on buying a computer, because I don't know, if it's going to be difficult. But, when I bought it, just having the insert key and the delete key was worth the price of admission in itself. Because one of my papers, I think I retyped it 3 times. That's totally insane. Like, why would you do that now? But anyway, you don't have to. So that's our mission today, is we're going to talk about some of the new tools. And I thought what we could do is we can start with if somebody wanted to start writing today, Betty and I, we almost every week we encourage people to start writing a journal, publish an ebook, something for free, if you want to do something major, but there's no reason why you can't get started. And some of the tools and many of the things, like Betty does a lot of work with Word, I know. But we have a few things that we're doing together using Google Docs, because that's easy to share and you can have multiple people go on. I just have to say, though, that Word has much better change tracking mechanisms and all that sort of stuff if you're going to collaborate. But people can get started really today with writing, with a Google Docs document, and then it makes it easy to share and have people advise with it. So the next step up is so what's the journey to get published? Like you just described the journey to go get, you typesetting, right? Yes, let's go to school to learn how to, you go out and get a Gutenberg press on sale on eBay or something and do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so Betty, why don't you talk a bit about what you do again, your brief, and then how the process starts for you and your clients.
Okay. Well, I like to say that I meet my clients where they are. I say I meet you where you are and grow with you. Because no two people have the same approach. Sometimes people will share a Google Doc with me. Sometimes they will just send me a Word document. Sometimes they just have an idea and then we have to start with that. So it can be any number of different processes to get started. But the story that you were just telling a moment ago, Judy, about your typesetting experience reminded me of a recent story with a formatter who was talking about when he started his typing business back in the day when your computer was the size of a refrigerator, and how when it was done, it was done. And nowadays people feel like they can just keep making revisions simply because they can. And so that changes the dialogue both for editors and for typesetters quite a bit. So where I start is, as I say, whatever you have going on, we start with that. I use various technologies to assist in the process. I may be ghostwriting, I may be simply editing, I may be coaching an author. And one of my favorite tools is something that I discovered a few months ago called Fathom. It's a Zoom add-on, and it takes a very accurate transcript of everything that takes place in the meeting, including the videos and many other things. And yeah, Judy's saying she uses Scrivener. There are other speech to text that are just great. And then once you have that transcript, that gives the ability to go ahead and turn that into a book. I have a couple of different clients that I'm doing that with. They tell me what they want to say, and I get that transcript. And of course, when speaking, you're always saying and then, and other things that all have to be taken out. However, it's wonderful the ease that you can just take the words and move them around and manipulate them these days, unlike the typewriter. Because I was thinking back to when I was in school, having to type out all of those papers. Oh boy.
Mimeograph paper.
Just again and again and again, and and then your fingers get really tired from pushing those keys and things. So yeah, it's great that we can do the things now and have the machines help us so much.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. And you mentioned that those various tools for recording and transcribing things, but there are also things like Grammarly, a lot of things that help with your grammar and Word has some things built in, other tools have it. And so a lot of things is a lot of the simple typos that come up, those tools can really help that process a lot.
Yeah. Those are the most obvious. The most obvious ones, Word will give you a visual scolding with a red squiggly line or a blue or something. Yeah. So fix this.
There's something. Well, there's a few things wrong in my brain, but one of the things is I always type the word "an" when I mean "and," and "and" when I mean "an," and I don't even know why that is, but it's so consistent, like almost 90%, even though I know about it. And so But the problem with Grammarly won't pick up something like that. Usually it just
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those little things, like for me, I capitalize the first letter, and then the next thing I know, the second letter is capitalized too. It's like
yes, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
Well, we all have those written tells, just like we have tells in our speech.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I often say, oh my gosh. So if I'm going through my transcript, that I know I'm going to do a search and replace, and it's going to take that out of there because it's not necessary. It doesn't help enhance the conversation.
True. Absolutely. Yeah. I have one client who, when he gets very excited, he'll say the same word 3 times in a row, just to be sure, you know.
Yeah.
You know? And so I have
write everything in all caps just for emphasis.
Yeah.
Oh.
Or also because he's thinking, you know, his mind moves faster than his mouth does.
No, I have to watch that in my own writing, because I didn't everything I was thinking didn't necessarily get down. Oh, there's a hole in this thought.
Yeah. Yes.
Well,
yeah. So
I love speech to text. And there are a bunch of, I mean, I think you can find speech to text in almost every platform, every app these days, where that used to be the case. But that to me is the best way to do your first iteration of whatever you're writing.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, there are lots of tools for that. And we're doing something. Betty and Roy and I have a mission to write a book called The Total Traffic and Conversion Way. And well, we've got tons of broadcasts like this. So I'm using a tool called Clarity Scribe that transcribes it and then also creates show notes and all sorts of stuff for it. So we're busy collecting all of the stuff we've said, and then we're going to hammer it into some sort of book, and it'll probably be a series. I think we'll have an introductory book and then a series after that. So all these tools make it a lot easier. I did a video project a while ago where I interviewed for a video project where we interviewed, I think, 20 people for at least half an hour each, and went through all of the video by hand with a spreadsheet, noting to see if anybody said anything interesting, to pull it down to a 12-minute video. So nowadays I would just run it through, transcribe it all, and then you go from there. I could have saved, you know, maybe 100 hours on working on the project with the transcription service.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Total Traffic and Conversion Way book is monumental because we have really already generated a lot of material.
Yes.
So it's great that you and Roy are so good at doing all the tech stuff, doing the transcribes and so on. You know, it's this has been a great collaboration, Judy. These gentlemen know so many technical things that are way above my head. And so I don't have to worry about them. They're getting done without me. So
well, it's nice that you can, you know, divide and conquer that, you know, and I think that's the other part about publishing that we have to be mindful of. Do the things that you do well, and the things that you're either that you don't love or that you don't particularly do well. Get somebody else on the team so that you can focus on your genius.
Yeah. That's really how it is. I mean, for me, getting into the word part and the deeper meaning and coaching the authors and doing the developmental editing, that's the prize, you know, and then I can do the other things, but that's not the center of my joy, shall we say?
Yeah. So we were talking about that in the context of editing before, because you like the developmental editing and then, you know, the ghostwriting things, but, you know, the copywriting and some of the other things, other people are better at that and you'd rather have somebody else do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would love to write the copy and have somebody else proofread it. That's the ideal world for me, you know, and format it while we're at it.
Yeah.
I got that one, you know. I mean, I can do it on a basic level. If you want something that's really polished and professional, Greg is going to have the ability to push a few buttons and make it look real pretty. So.
Yeah. So I'm along those lines. One of the things I wanted to say is just for this discussion today is take people from, if let's say you wanted to start your book today and publish it tonight for free, you could, like if you were really fast, because you can write it in some tool like Google Docs. And if you have enough attention to the formatting and the margins and stuff, you can upload that up into Google, Kindle, what it was, Google, Kindle Direct Publishing, Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. And as long as you can get the format right, you can get it, in a cover right. It's a little bit fiddly for a print book, not so fiddly for an ebook, but you can figure it out. you can and get it done. But we were talking. Judy knows Adobe InDesign, and so. So she's going to regret ever mentioning that in a conversation because it was already on my list of tools to use. And it says, at some point, like there's a tool that Betty's mentioned, I'm going to describe it later, called Atticus, which is pretty good for, relatively simple books. And you can, you don't even have to decide your style. You can just collect the style and it automatically reformats everything according to the style you want. And you can create custom styles. But if you really want a really sophisticated book, at some point, you're going to have to get into Adobe world, which can be very daunting, and InDesign, where you can do absolutely anything. I don't think there's anything design-wise you can't do in InDesign if you know what you're doing, which apparently you do. And so
good.
Yeah. And if anybody's ever tried it themselves and tried to figure it out in InDesign, then you have an appreciation of why you might spend quite a lot of money to have somebody who knows what they're doing format your book for you. So
talk to Judy. I'll tell you right now.
Talk to Judy. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I told Greg this too. I had been using PageMaker, and I used PageMaker before it morphed. And then I used Quark for 13 years, and I taught Quark Express. I taught people how to format using it, because I was in several groups where people wanted to know how to use the tool. And the day that I left using Quark, I had purchased a new Mac, and Apple and Adobe had a deal. They were giving away version 1.5 of InDesign. And if any of you know InDesign, what are we at now? I think we're at 27, 29, whatever it is. And I said, okay, they're telling me I can take my Quark file and InDesign's going to read it. And I'm going, show me.
I believe it when I see it.
Show me. Everything came over. The only thing that used to drive me nuts, which doesn't and they finally just changed it. In Quark, you had these pages, your master pages, but it was, I can't even remember now what it was called, but they were your, styles. And then you brought over your information, and they both have styles, so you can map it. You have styles in Microsoft Word, you have styles in almost every program, so that if you want consistency, so say for your headings and your subheadings and the way that the paragraphs are formatted, you set up styles before you publish. So everything came over. And I went, oh my gosh, oh, there I did it. Oh my gosh. But the big kicker wasn't just that it could read my Quark files. I no longer had to go through the painful process of going, oh, here's a photo. I have to convert it to this format to bring it into Quark. I no longer have to do all this other nonsense. Adobe had a whole world, so I could bring in native files from Illustrator, from Photoshop, and they went right into InDesign, and they were perfect. And I didn't have to fuss with them when I did my output. So that was like a game changer, huge time saver.
Wow.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I think you and I had talked about styles before when we were talking before this meeting, this broadcast. And anyway, one of the things was, and you said you had a client who sent you a document that was just pure hell. But I think for anybody who's going to do it themselves, if you pay attention to using styles in whatever it is you're using, Microsoft Word, um, Google Docs, whatever it is, if you set up your styles first and write within the style. So basically, if you're formatting something and not using a style for it, you're creating a hell for yourself, really, somewhere down the road. And I've used tools. I used a tool called FrameMaker when I was writing documents and stuff, and you could do nothing with that tool other than the styles. You couldn't do paragraph hacking like you can in many other tools. So that's why one piece of advice is learn what styles are. You at least use the chapter styles, the heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and then get your formatting, and then just use styles for all the formatting, and life will be much easier. So
indeed, yeah.
Well, I bet you guys have done this too. You start off and you're writing away, and if you don't use a style, you're going, well, how did I make that look way back in this other chapter? So yeah, it's like, to me, it's a shortcut and it's a habit. Yeah. And you get in the habit of set your stuff up. And if you're going to work with a designer, you might work with a designer ahead of time and say, let's decide what the styles are going to be. And then they can map if they're going to use a different tool than you are. So if someone's working in Word, but it's going to go into InDesign, they'll tell you, and you can export that original document into or import it into the design program, and all of that stuff comes right across. And so again, you are saving time and money.
Yeah.
Both we want that.
we want that. So I had mentioned Atticus, which is relatively new. I had a copy of Quorum. I don't know if you're familiar with Quorum, which is a book formatting program for Mac only. And one of the features is that you imported your document from Word, and then it would allow you to change the formatting on the fly. So I was tracking down, and I read a number of reviews on this Atticus thing, and it sounded really promising. And one of the things is, as long as you've sort of adhered to having the styles and the chapters and everything properly, you can just click on oops, I have to go into the actual page here, but you can just change the format, right? And then here you can output for the print version. It all formats everything with all the right margins for print. Or at one time, it probably supported a whole pile of ebook formats. I think EPUB is simply just won the war. But I mean, just the fact that you could, in a click, change the whole style for the entire document just saves saves a lot of sanity.
So, right. Well, I remember when Dave Chesson introduced that, and it was kind of to go head to head with Vellum, which is only on Mac, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah. And it's a pretty good program itself too. And at one time, it was almost the only one of that kind for, other than jumping into InDesign or hiring somebody. You really didn't have very many tools that you could do it with. Anyway, so that's kind of fun. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah. It doesn't have a collaboration. They keep on promising the collaboration feature. It hasn't gone there yet, but I did realize that I can export into Adobe format PDF and use the review power of Adobe Pro to get feedback on it. So there are ways around it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it took a long time before Scrivener had a collaboration feature.
Yeah.
And once it started, I was so relieved, because I would work with clients and they would send stuff, before they would send me stuff, and then I'd have to go do this whole revision thing. And when we're doing things in Scrivener, then it's saving it to the cloud. We can both work on, or whoever is in the team can all work on the same document, which I really like that, because we all know if there's multiple versions of document, somebody's not going to be on the right one.
Yeah.
So Betty has the habit of, she puts the date in the title of things, so that helps a lot.
Yeah.
If we have, we collect it, we use Google Drive for a bunch of things. Like we have for clients, we have a bunch of folders, and then we'll have documents like posts and ideas and things. And Betty's really good at putting a date on it. So.
Yeah, because, sometimes you have like 10 versions of something, and you can go V1, V2, and that helps too, but having the date is like, okay, here's the last time I looked at this thing, and then, pull that up and see if it's correct or if it needs another version. Yep.
Yeah. I agree. Putting the date on it is really helpful to me. Oh, do you love the ones when it's like final? No,
the very last final. Yeah. No, yeah. Exactly. Just today, I have version 4 of the final.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I will usually put in, the date it was started, and then the last revision date.
Oh, that would work too. Yeah.
I usually put that right at the top under the title.
Yeah.
Yeah, for not necessarily something I'm publishing, but like an article or something I'm working on.
Yeah.
And that way I can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So this is great. So, are there any other special tools that you would recommend to somebody for writing and also for publishing?
Well, I've been playing around with Sudowrite. I'm probably for the last 2 weeks, because everybody's heard of artificial intelligence. Well, every tool we've just talked about has had artificial intelligence baked into it from day one. Yeah. Autocorrect, that's artificial intelligence. So anyway, Sudowrite is kind of a fun tool if you want to be exploring creation of worlds, characters, names, fleshing out ideas. And it's a good place to start. So it's kind of like having a conversation with yourself in a way, because you have to be really good at creating the prompt in order to get a result that's going to be meaningful to you. And I'm just thrilled with what I've seen so far, because you can expand. You can, so say you have writing that you've already done. You throw it into Sudowrite, and then you can say, oh, here's this paragraph. Could you expand this, or could you give me a different version of it? Or could you, interpret this as if it was a Norse myth? And so it's kind of a creativity tool. It's a blast to play around with that. And I use a lot of I use ChatGPT 4 to do some idea generation for marketing, and some of the stuff that I don't have to think quite as hard about, and then I go in and edit it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So one of our clients, who's a really good client because she does a lot of work herself, and anyway, I'm writing a personality style quiz. And she had the first version, which was it was okay. And then she came up with one that was absolutely stunning. And she said, oh, I used a tool like ChatGPT to write it, so it come up with something really quite amazing. I'm prone to writing poetry on maple donuts. So that's my inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah, you sent us a pretty good one the other day,
Yeah, maybe I'll put it in the chat just so people know what we're talking about. Anyway, the other thing is I'm using a thing called Clarity Scribe. It's put out by what's his last? Anyway, his name just fell out of my head. Anyway, it has a thing really useful, like for this broadcast here. after the show, what I can do is I can upload the audio file from this, and he'll go do a transcription, plus he'll do show notes, suggested episode titles, and an email to send out. And a lot of the stuff is really pretty good. Yeah. So
that's lovely. I
yeah.
mean, well,
Ray Edwards. Yeah.
Did either of you ever use Descript? Descript will also take video, and you can edit the video as if you were editing Microsoft Word. It will create notes, but I found that I have to do a lot of editing. And to me, it takes me so much time to do the hand editing that I haven't been thrilled with the results. But it may be the way that I'm using the tool, because I don't use it on a daily basis. It is a fabulous tool, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been using a thing called Simon Says AI for transcribing stuff. And it has it's good collaboration stuff, really good. But this Clarity Scribe, I think the transcriptions are almost flawless. Like, it can't spell Roy DeCan, but other than that, but it's totally unformatted. Like the other tool, you can identify the speaker, and it'll try to figure out and mark the speaker and all the times when they speak. But all in all, this is pretty lots of really handy stuff. Anyway, I'll put my the first thing I ever wrote with ChatGPT was a haiku to the maple donut. And I don't know if you see it in the chat there. And then I wrote a sonnet the other day, and it kind of, the formatting gets destroyed when you put it in a comment, but it was actually pretty good. The Bard probably would have written it himself, if they had Tim Hortons and maple donuts in his day. It's a Canadian obsession with maple.
Right.
Yeah. That is funny. That is very, very, very funny.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Says something about my mind that was the first thing I decided to do with it. So,
well, and it's interesting because, I think this is the other thing. If you've used any of the AI writing tools, and I mean, now it's incorporated in Microsoft Word, it's incorporated in Bing, it's incorporated in Google, everything. If you put in the same prompt multiple times, you're going to get different results.
Yeah.
As if you were asking if I asked Greg a question, he could give me 3 different answers. Betty could give me 3 different answers. Mm-hmm. And so you can start choosing, but the more you get familiar with the nuances of any of the tools that we've talked about, I mean, Grammarly included, Grammarly changed my life, changed my writing. And I also started working with Pro Writing Aid, which I love. And both Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid not only look at those common mistakes that we make, but it can look at, do you have anything that's redundant? Can do plagiarism checking, which I think is invaluable to be able to quickly go through that. But then I would still give the product of my work, I would still give it to an editor, a person like Betty to look at, because the AI is predictive. It's not thinking, it's going, well, this is probably what follows, this word follows that word.
Right.
But a person knows emotion and nuance, and you guys aren't getting put out of business, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. The people that I work with need a direct hands-on human being to edit their material. Some of it is highly emotional, and there's no way that AI is going to pick that up.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But you can still have fun with AI for idea generation, and see, you can see different versions of what, could I say it this way? And what if I was, the thing that I've learned about doing it this way is the more information I put in about who I am or who my client is, the better the result is going to match their tonality.
Yes, very good point.
And some of them get to know you, right? The AI gets to understand your voice and your way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, like that Clarity Scribe, I think has a bias towards Ray Edwards' way of approaching writing. So I think much of it will get spewed out will sound a bit like Ray's writing.
Could be a worse person to emulate, you know?
Yeah, it could be a worse person. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's fabulous. So yes. Do you want any more comments about this editing process? Because that's really important. Like I think we established that there's some really good free tools and you can do it all yourself, but you probably don't want to. And there are various reasons why you want to have people in with another fresh pair of eyes to take a look at it. My experience with editing is I wrote a paper one time and I was in a band and I gave everybody a copy. We went for a bite to eat or something, and everybody had a copy and they read it. Every single person had something different they flagged, and so in some ways it said more about them than it did my writing. But one person was a pure knee-jerk grammar person. Somebody else didn't look at the grammar at all and ignored all of the massive errors and just made a comment on the content. And then everybody was different, and not one person reported something that somebody else had reported. So I found that really interesting. So that means you probably need 2 or 3 different sets of eyes on your document if you really want it to be the best it can be in multiple passes, really.
Agreed. Like my first editor of my first book, I thought everything was crystal clear. And then he was a developmental editor who came back to me with comments like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
"Give me an example, please. I have no idea what you're talking about," and things like that. And I was like, wow, okay. And it was very useful because he was coming from a different culture, opposite gender, the whole thing. And I was like, oh, if I really want to get my point across, I have to realize that I think people know what I'm talking about and they don't, which is very common. People have their cultural assumptions that are in the back of their story and they may not apply to your reader.
Yeah. I found that when people wanted to make what appeared to be a grammatical change, really was because they didn't understand the main point. And that made me go back and think about it again and rephrase it.
Right.
So it's really not lack of clarity about what the purpose of that sentence was than a technical issue.
So much more rewarding, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think too, it also depends on, are you writing, are you doing creative nonfiction? Are you doing, literary fiction? Are you doing sales copy? All of those have different, just like genre rules, there are different things that we're expecting to see and hear in different styles of writing. So yeah, my poetry doesn't look like my nonfiction, and it doesn't look like my literary fiction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate that. And well, I'm involved in 2 different groups, in the California Writing Clubs, and the rubric for our prose anthologies is very different. Each of them is very different than the other because each club has its own culture and style. And so what is acceptable, there are some things that it should be in Times New Roman, 12 point, double spaced. That's going to be consistent. But always when you're writing, you need to think about what's the context and how can I communicate that in the best way possible. And I certainly write a lot more straightforward than I did when I was, a young thing back in the day, because I liked big words, but they don't always do the best job of communicating the idea.
Yeah, and Grammarly's good at that, trying to simplify things, right? Okay, let's replace these 5 words with 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Betty, as an editor, you do that too, because you're looking at, do we need this big, long sentence, or could we chop this up, or could we get rid of all this other fluff?
I agree. That's really, it comes down to that so many times. And, sometimes an author gets really attached to their idea of how their idea has to come across. And they have a lot of emotional backstory about it, and it can be a wrestling match to go, no, this sentence does not work here.
Yeah.
You know.
I had to get over my ego with submitting things to an editor a while ago.
Yeah. And then, as the editor, sometimes you have to get over your ego and just go, okay, well, if they want to screw up their message, they're allowed to do that.
Yeah. So along those lines, one of my projects here, if I'm working on Rocket North Lost in Space, I actually technically helped publish the first version of this almost 20 years ago. Now it's come full circle. Now I needed to fix the formatting so I can get it up on Amazon Direct Publishing. But I'm reading through it, and it's the kind of thing, it's all written in his voice. And, like if you gave it to some editors, they would absolutely destroy the book. It'd lose all of its character. So, so there's, and it's not even edited for lawsuits necessarily. Like, he actually gave a copy to everybody got mentioned in the book, and he had a few people
for lawsuits. Funny.
Whoa.
Well, the subtitle is Rocket Norton Lost in Space, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And he uses the real names for everybody in it. And, and including some really uncomfortable things. The only thing that kind of saves it is he paints a worse picture of himself than anybody else in the book, so people kind of put it into that context, right? So
right.
Yeah. So there's some truly horrifying things there. And if you've ever hung out with a rock band in the 60s and 70s, it probably was not horrifying. But if you haven't, some of the stuff in there is fairly.
No, it's true. You look back on, I look back on that and go, oh wow. And we survived, and we're still here to laugh about it, right?
Yeah.
There's
a story about they invited the 10 years after people to come on a boat cruise in Vancouver, and the 10 years after band Alvin Lee and were so horrified by the goings on of the ship that they got the captain to put them over and put them ashore anywhere.
What? Oh man, I can't even imagine what
it must have been pretty bad.
Well, it was just like, as you described it, as a big orgy of drugs and sex and everywhere. And apparently Alvin Lee and company were maybe a little bit more conservative than that. So they just said, get us off this boat.
Yeah. Well, when you travel with someone, you find out things that you may not have suspected earlier. And, and then when you get on a boat with someone, it's even more so, because you have to either get off the boat or jump off the boat or whatever if you don't like it. So, yeah.
They were willing to jump off the boat, right? Even if there were sharks.
No. They were serious.
Yeah. And apparently the next boat cruise was even worse in a different way.
See? Whoa. Yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah. But anyway, so there we so okay, so we've had so that the moral of the story is you can write about almost anything. And there's probably a market for almost anything you want to write. And there are lots of fabulous tools to take you from getting started. Betty and I, we always encourage people to get started, even if they're writing notes in a napkin or a journal, or typing stuff into some kind of program, or even just speaking stuff into a phone recorder.
That's right.
Just get going. There's no reason. There's some fabulous tools to get started, and pretty good tools all the way through, and things that people can do themselves. They can take themselves all the way through. Publish on Amazon Direct Publishing, maybe BookBaby or some of those other services without getting a whole lot of things involved. And then Betty has clients that probably require a lot of attention all the way along the line, and need to bring in a Zen master InDesign person like Judy to get the absolute perfect typeset look to the book. Yeah. Yes. Which was a lot easier than it was in the early days.
Much.
It sure sounds that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So any final comments before we ring off?
Well, there's one tool that you didn't mention. You know, you're saying talking to a recorder. Otter.ai is fabulous and also really good, very good recognition of what you're saying to get your ideas from speech to text. And if you haven't tried it, there's a free version.
Yeah.
You may not need the paid version, but give it a try because you'll start to see that you can get your ideas into a shape where you can look at it. Oh, there's one other tool that you didn't mention, and it's fairly new. Apple released Freeform, which you can do notes, you can do ideas, you can have visual, do a mind map on it, and check it out. It's sort of fun to play with, and it works on your computer. It works on mobile devices too.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat. And still thinking. And that was Apple.
Yeah.
Apple Freeform.
Freeform.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a very pretty. I mean, if you've ever worked with a mind mapping tool, you might have gone a little bit awkward to work with. The closest thing I can think of to Freeform is GoodNote, which is also really good. And Evernote. We didn't talk about Evernote. Great place to put your stuff in, so you have it all in one spot.
Right.
Yeah.
They all work.
They all work. Yeah. I use Otter AI, and it's pretty good for taking notes for yourself. And it's also even good if you're in a meeting, you know, like a Zoom meeting, and you want to take notes. It works pretty well with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Betty has in a Zoom thing. She has a, well, what is that? What do you use? That little recorder?
I use Fathom.video.
Yeah.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. It's so good.
It's remarkable. I was blown away by it.
Me too. It was like, oh, everything just got so much better.
Yeah. Along those lines, I use just Apple has, or like all Apple devices have a thing just called Notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that. I put it in it. And what the good thing about it is if I'm on my phone or I'm on the desktop, wherever I am, I always have access to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's useful too. And so I sometimes will write, if I have an idea, some kind of weird idea at 4 a.m. that Roy and Betty are going to hear about soon. I'll type it. If I don't type it in an email and just send it.
Don't call me at 4 o'clock, okay?
I won't call you, but I might put it in an email. But
I know that about you. Yeah.
So anyway, but some of those things started in those little notes. So all those little things are handy. Whatever works for you, really. So
yeah,
and just keeping it organized. So have a dedicated folder for your stuff, because I think that's one of the first things I do with clients. I say, okay, number one, we're going to create an asset folder.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're not having to go, well, where did I stick that? And when did I do that? And then you can have folders inside of there, but this is your writing place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we do with our clients. We start off with a Google Drive folder, and then we create subfolders. And then as we go, it becomes more important to even create more folders so it's easier to outline, the structure of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to avoid having one big folder with 100 things dumped into it.
Yeah, no, that never works.
Yeah. Yeah, so there we go. Great minds think alike, fools seldom differ. so here we are. Yeah, that's really a fundamental. Betty and I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago just on outlining, how valuable that is to do outlining and order, have some structure. Like, I think, if you've got a good outline, the rest of the writing actually is easier. You just have to fill in the blank spots.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I'm collaborating on a book with another author, and that's exactly what we're doing. She had a course outline. I had a book outline, and I had part of my book written. She had her course, but she hadn't turned it into the book part yet. So we're looking at the two of them, and this way we're not going, well, are we duplicating stuff? We're not going to do that.
Right.
Okay. So that's part of our approach too, is we create it in one spot, and then we, you know, and then we use it for a course, for posts, and a book. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Once, used many places.
Oh yeah, right.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So I think we're going to have to recruit you into our total traffic and conversion team.
Yes.
Ooh, I love it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm with you on the fun part. You know that
Yeah,
I know that's a requirement, but if you're not having fun, don't do it.
We take that seriously.
I'm right there with that.
We have to have fun. If our clients aren't along for fun, well, that's it. They're gone.
That's right. That's right. Oh my goodness, this has been fun, you guys. But speaking of fun, I have to run.
Okay. Okay, I'll play our little fun little video, and we'll sign off for the day.
Okay.
And here we go. Thanks for joining us, Judy and Betty, and happy Monday, everybody.